Chapter 10 of The Impossibles. The Impossibles by Lawrence M. Jennifer and Randall Garrett. Chapter 10. Malone put in a great deal of time, he imagined, just staring at the face of the little old lady on the screen. At last he spoke. "My God," he said. "Her name is Fuego. I'll be damned." "I've told you," the Queen said with some asperity, "not to swear, Sir Kenneth." "I know," Malone said, "but you're excited," the Queen said. "You're stunned. Goodness, you don't need to tell me that, Sir Kenneth. I know." "But she's—" Malone discovered that he couldn't talk. He swallowed a couple of times and then went on. "She's Mike Fuego's sister." "That's exactly right, Sir Kenneth," the Queen said. "That's just what I told you." "Then she swiped the book to protect her little brother," Malone said. "Oh, boy." "Exactly, Sir Kenneth," the Queen said. "And she doesn't care about me at all," Malone said. "I mean, she only went out with me because I was me, Malone, and she wanted the notebook. That's all there was to it." He added an expletive. The Queen frowned but said nothing about it. "I wouldn't say that if I were you," she went on. "Quite the contrary. She does like you, you know, and she thinks you're a very nice person." The Queen beamed. "You are, you know," she said. "Oh," Malone said uncomfortably. "Sure." "You don't have to think that she merely went out with you because of her brother's notebook," the Queen said. "But she does have a strong sense of loyalty, and he is her younger brother, after all." "He sure is," Malone said. "He's a great kid, little Mike." "You see," the Queen continued imperturbably, "Mike told her about losing the notebook the other night, when he struck you." "When he struck me," Malone said. "Oh, yes, he struck me all right." "He guessed that you must have it when you started asking questions about the silent spooks, you see," the Queen said. "That was the only way you could have found out about him, unless you were telepathic, which, of course, you're not." "No," Malone said. "Now, understand me," the Queen said. "I do not think that his striking you was a very nice act." "I don't either," Malone said. It hurt quite a lot." "Certainly," the Queen said. "But he didn't hurt the car any, and he didn't want to. He just wanted to ride around in it for a while." "He likes red Cadillacs," Malone said. "Oh, yes," the Queen said. "He thinks they're wonderful." "Good for him," Malone said sourly. "Well, now," the Queen said, "you just go right on over to her house. Of course she doesn't live with an aunt." "No," Malone said. "She lives with Mike and his mother." "Why not?" the Queen said. "She's part of the family." Malone nodded silently. "She'll give you the book, Sir Kenneth. I just know that she will. And I want you to be very nice to her when you ask for it. She's a very nice girl, you know." "She's a swell girl," Malone said morosely. "And Hey, wait a minute." "Yes, Sir Kenneth?" "How come you can read her thoughts?" Malone said. "And Mike's? I thought you had to know someone pretty well before you could read them at a distance like this. Do you? Know them, I mean?" "Oh, no," the Queen said. "But I can read you, of course." Malone could see that the Queen was trying very hard not to look proud of herself. "And last night," she went on, "you two were, well, Sir Kenneth, you had a real rapport with each other." "My goodness, yes." "Well," Malone said, "Don't explain, Sir Kenneth," the Queen said. "It really isn't necessary. I thought it was very sweet. And in any case, I can pick her up now, because of that rapport. Not quite as well as I can pick you up, but enough to get the strong surface thoughts." "Oh," Malone said, "but Mike—" "I can't pick him up at all this far away," the Queen said. "There's just a faint touch of him, though, through the girl. But all I know about him is what she thinks." She smiled gently. "He's a nice boy, basically," she said. Sure he is, Malone said. He's got a nice blackjack, too, basically. He grimaced. Were you reading my mind all last night? He said. Well, the Queen said, no. Toward morning you were getting so fuzzy I just didn't bother. I can understand that, Malone said. I nearly didn't bother myself. The Queen nodded. But toward afternoon, she said, I didn't have anything to do, so I just listened in. You do have such a nice mind, Sir Kenneth. So refreshing and different, especially when you're in love. Malone blushed quietly. Oh, I know, the Queen said. You'd much rather think of yourself as a sort of apprentice lecher, a kind of cynical Don Juan, but I know, Malone said. Don't tell me about it, all right? Of course, Sir Kenneth, the Queen said, if you wish it. Basically, I'm a nice boy, Malone said. Sure I am. He paused. Do you have any more pertinent information, Your Majesty? Not right now, the Queen admitted. But if I do, I'll let you know. She giggled. You know, I had to argue awfully hard with Dr. Hatterer to get to use the telephone, she said. I'll bet, Malone said. But I did manage, she said, and winked. I won't have that sort of trouble again. Malone wondered briefly what dark secret Dr. Hatterer had that Her Majesty had discovered in his mind and used to blackmail him with. At last he decided that it was probably none of his business and didn't matter too much anyway. Quite right, Sir Kenneth, the Queen said. And goodbye for now. Goodbye, Your Majesty, Malone said. He bowed again and flipped off the phone. Bowing in a phone booth wasn't the easiest thing in the world to do, he thought to himself, but somehow he had managed it. He reached into his pocket, half convinced for a moment that it was an Elizabethan belt pouch. Talks with Her Majesty always had that effect. After a time, Malone came to believe in the strange, bright world. But he shook off the lingering effects of her psychosis, fished out some coins, and thought for a minute. So Dorothea, had lifted the notebook. That was some help, certainly. It let him know something more about the enemy he was facing, but it wasn't really a lot of help. What did he do now? Her Majesty had suggested going to the Fuego house, collaring the girl, but treating her nicely, Malone reminded himself, and demanding the book back. She'd even said he would get the book back, and since she knew some of what went on in Dorothea Fuego's mind, she was probably right. But what good was that going to do him? He knew everything that was in the book. Getting it back was something that could wait. It didn't sound particularly profitable, and it didn't even sound like fun. What he needed was a next move. He thought for a minute, dropped the coins into the phone, and dialed the number of the police commissioner's office. After a brief argument with the secretary, he had Furnack on the phone. And this time, Malone told himself, he was going to be polite. If possible. Good afternoon, John Henry, he said suddenly when the commissioner's face was finally on the screen. Can you get me some more information? Furnack stared at him sourly. Depends, he said. On what? Malone said, telling himself he wasn't going to get irritated and knowing perfectly well that he was lying. On what kind of information you want? Furnack said. Well, Malone said, there's a warehouse I want to know some more about. Who the owner is, for one thing, and... Furnack nodded. I've got it, he said. He fished around on his desk and brought up a sheet of paper. He held it up to the screen while Malone copied off the name and address. Lieutenant Lynch told me all about it. Lynch? Malone said. But Lynch works for me, Malone, Furnack said. Remember that. But he said he wouldn't do anything, and he won't, Furnack said. He just reported it to me for my action. He knew I was working with you, Malone. And I am his boss, remember? Great, Malone said. Now, John Henry. Hold it, Malone, Fernak said. I'd like a little information too, you know. I'd like to know just what the hell is going on, if it isn't too much trouble. It's not that, John Henry, Malone said earnestly. Really, it's just that all this about vanishing boys, Fernak said. Disappearing into thin air. All this nonsense. It isn't nonsense, Malone said. All right, Fernak said indulgently. Boys disappear every day like that. Sure they do. He leaned toward the screen and his voice was as hard as his face. Malone, are these kids mixed up with those impossible robberies you had me looking up? Well, Malone said, I think so, but I doubt if you could prove it. Fernak's face had begun its slow climb toward purple again. Malone, he said, if you're suppressing evidence, even if you are the FBI, I'm not suppressing any evidence, Malone said. I don't think you could prove a connection. I don't think I could prove a connection. I don't think anybody could. Not right now. Fernak leaned back, apparently mollified. John Henry, Malone said, I want to ask you to keep your hands off this case, to let me handle it my way. Fernak nodded absently. Sure, Malone, he said. What? I said sure, Fernak said. Isn't that what you wanted? Well, yes, Malone said, but... Fernak leaned all the way back in his chair, his face a mask of disappointment and frustration. Malone, he said, I wish I'd never heard of this case. I wish I had been retired or died before it ever came up. I've been a police officer in New York for a long time, and I wish this case had waited a few more years to happen. He stopped. Malone leaned against the back wall of the phone booth and lit a cigarette. Andy Burris called me less than half an hour ago, Fernak said. Oh, Malone said. That's right, Fernak said. Good old Burris of the FBI. And he told me this was a national security case. National security. It's your baby, Malone, because Burris wants it that way. He snorted. So don't worry about me, he said. I'm just here to cooperate. The patriotic, loyal, dumb slave of a grateful government. Malone blew out a plume of smoke. You know, John Henry, he said, you might have made a good FBI man yourself. You've got the right attitude. Never mind the jokes, Fernak said bitterly. Okay, Malone said. But tell me, did you actually make arrangements for me to get into that warehouse? I suppose you know that's what I want. I guess that much, Fernak said. I haven't made any arrangements at all yet, but I will. I'll have safe and loft to get the keys and a full set of floor plans to the place while they're at it. Will that do, Your Majesty? Malone choked on his smoke and shot a quick look over his shoulder. There was nothing there but the wall of the booth. Queen Elizabeth I was nowhere in evidence. Then he realized that Fernak had been talking to him. Don't do that, he said. What? Fernak said. Malone realized in one awful second how strange the explanation was going to sound. Could he say that he thought he had been mistaken for an old friend of his, Elizabeth Tudor? Could he say that he had just had a call from her? In the end, he merely said, nothing, and let it go at that. Well, anyhow, Fernak said. Do you want anything else? Not right now, Malone said. I'll let you know, though. And thanks, John Henry. No matter why you're doing this, thanks. I don't deserve 'em, Fernak muttered. And I hope you get caught in some kind of deadfall and have to come screaming to the cops. That, Malone reflected, was the second time a cop had suggested his yelling if he got into trouble. Hadn't the police force ever heard of telephones? He said goodbye and flipped off. Then he stared at the screen for a little while as his cigarette burned down between his fingers. At last, he put the cigarette out and went downstairs again to the bar. If he had to do some heavy thinking, he told himself, there was absolutely no reason why he couldn't enjoy himself a little while doing it. The evening rush had begun, and Malone found himself a stool simply by slipping into one while the drinker's back was turned. Once ensconced, he huddled himself up like an old drunk, thus effectively cutting himself off from interruptions, and lit another cigarette. Ray was down at the other end of the bar, chatting with a red-headed woman and her pale, bald escort. Malone sighed and set himself to the job of serious, constructive thinking. How, he asked himself, do you go about catching a person who can vanish away like so much smoke? Well, Malone could think of one solution, but it was pretty bloody. Nailing the kids to a wall would probably work, but he couldn't say much else for it. There had to be another way out. For some reason, Malone just couldn't see himself with a mouthful of nails, a hammer, and a teenager. It sounded just a little too messy. Then, of course, there were handcuffs. That sounded a little better. The trouble was that Malone simply didn't have enough information, and knew it. Obviously, the kids could carry stuff with them when they teleported. The stuff they stole proved that. And their clothes, Malone added. Apparently, the kids didn't arrive at wherever they went stark staring naked. But how close to a teleport did the things he carried have to be? In other words, Malone thought, if you put handcuffs on a teleport, would the handcuffs vanish when the teleport did? And did that include the part of the cuff you were holding? What happened if you snapped half the cuff around your own wrist first? Did you go along with the teleport? Or did your wrist go while you stayed behind and wondered how long it would take to bleed to death? Or what? All the questions were intriguing ones. Malone sighed, wishing he knew the answer to even one of them. It was somewhat comforting to think that he had managed to progress a little anyway. The kids hadn't meant anybody to find out about them, but Malone had found out about them and alerted all the cops in town, as well as the rest of the FBI. He knew just who they were and where they lived and how they performed the miracles they performed. Anyhow, he knew something about that last item. He even knew who had his notebook. He tabled that thought and went back to feeling victorious. Within a few seconds, the sense of achievement was gone and futility had come in its place. After all, he still didn't know how to catch the kids, did he? No. He thought about handcuffs some more and then gave up. He'd just have to try it and see how it worked. And if the teleports took his wrist away, he'd go after them and make them give it back. Sure he would. That reminded him of the notebook again. And since the thing was being so persistent, he decided he might as well pay some attention to it. Dorothea had the notebook. Malone tried to see himself barging in on her and asking for it. And he didn't care for the picture at all, no matter how good Queen Bess felt about it. After all, she thought Mike Fuego was basically a nice kid. So what did she know? He closed his eyes. There he was in the Fuego apartment, talking to Dorothea. Dorothea, he muttered, you filched my notebook. That didn't sound very effective. And besides, it wasn't really his notebook. He tried again. Dorothea, you pinched your brother's notebook. Now, for some reason, it sounded like something covered by the Vice Squad. It sounded terrible, but there are other ways of saying the same thing. Dorothea, he muttered, you borrowed your brother's notebook. That was too patronizing. Malone told himself that he sounded like a character straight out of 3D screens and settled himself gamely for another try. Dorothea, you have your brother's notebook. To which the obvious answer was, yes, I do, and so what? Or possibly, how do you know? And Malone thought about answering that one. Queen Elizabeth told me was the literal truth, but somehow it didn't sound like it. And he couldn't find another answer to give the girl. Dorothea, he said, and a voice from nowhere added, will you have another drink? Damn it, Malone exploded. That's not the question. Drinks have nothing to do with notebooks. It's notebooks I'm after. Can't you understand? Belatedly, he looked up. There was Ray, the barman. Oh, he said. I just came over, Ray said, and I figured if you couldn't find your notebook, maybe you'd like a drink, so long as you're here. Ray, Malone said with feeling, you are an eminently reasonable fellow. I accept your solution. Nay, more, I endorse your solution, wholeheartedly. Ray went off to mix, and Malone stared after him happily. This was really a nice place, he reflected, almost as nice as the City Hall bar in Chicago where he had gone long ago with his father. But he tore his mind away from the happy past and concentrated instead on the miserable present. He decided for the last time that he was not going to ask Dorothea for the book. Not just yet, anyhow. After all, it wasn't as if he needed the book. He knew his own name, and he knew Lynch's name, and he knew the names on the second page. And he didn't see any particular need for a picture of a red Cadillac, no matter how nicely colored it was. So, he asked himself, why embarrass everybody by trying to get it back? Of course, it was technically a crime to pick pockets, and that went double or triple for the pockets of FBI agents. But Malone told himself that he didn't feel like pressing charges anyhow, and Dorothy probably didn't make a habit out of pocket picking. He sighed and glanced at his watch. It was 15 minutes of 6. Now he knew what his next move was going to be. He was going to go back to his hotel and change his clothes. That is, he amended, as soon as he finished the drink that Ray was setting up in front of him. End of chapter 10. Read by Paul Hampton.